Smoke your hog, get out your bib, solid, picking a rib. Out the keys to a barbecue and start picking a rib.
And kept on picking.
Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, smoked the hog on a red outlaw, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking, cause barbecue's taking the nation.
It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where we pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and today we're looking at Joe Galaxy, published in January from Fantagraphics. And if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can already tell that you're getting the censored version so as not to offend the sensibilities of YouTube sponsors. You can get the uncensored versions by joining my Patreon, or if you don't want to join, you can simply buy a collection without becoming a patron. Okay, so Mattioli, he was an Italian artist, he died in 2019, and if you know him, it's probably for Squeak the Mouse, which is the extremely adult parody of Tom and Jerry that was allegedly the inspiration for Itchy and Scratchy on The Simpsons. Only Squeak the Mouse is even more outrageously violent and gory, with graphic nudity and hardcore sex thrown in. And it's a nostril piece, frankly. It was out of print and much sought after for years in North America, in part because it was temporarily seized in New York for violating obscenity laws. But Fantagraphics put out a beautiful edition just a couple of years ago, which is still widely available for purchase. This isn't that edition, sadly. This is a Spanish reprint from 2020. And it doesn't really matter because it's pantomime and even all of the signage in the background and the sound effects are conveniently in English in the original Italian version. So pretty much just the copyright info is in Spanish. But the Fantagraphics edition is a little nicer, it's a bit bigger, it has a better cover. I don't really like the double yellow on the cover of this edition. Although apparently there's a misprint on page 47 of the Fantagraphics version, so maybe the Spanish reprint is a smarter choice. Either way though, it's a 5-nostril book. So when I found out that Fantagraphics was releasing another Mattioli collection, which perhaps you're hearing about now for the first time, I snapped it up immediately. And I should take a moment to shout out Scotty Vaughn's channel and his series Adult Erotica in Comics, where I learned that this book was coming out. So after you've watched all of my videos a couple of times, go check out his channel. Okay, diving into this. The cover is nice, but I don't know why they didn't go with a hardcover. This wrapped card buckles a bit, and it might be hard to see on the camera, but there's a permanent crease formed just from a single read-through, and it's the same for the back cover. I'm not even sure if you could read this book without this problem. There's a brief intro, not a lot of information, but it's written by a colleague of his, and it's kind of sweet. And, not every book needs a 10-page introduction, I guess. The book is divided into 4 sections. This one, side A, is the first. And if we jump to the end, you can see the sides each contain a sort of era of Joe Galaxy publishing. I guess they use this record album motif because it's referenced in one of the comics. And I guess there are quite a few music references throughout, but not that many. I don't know, but they go all in on the record album theme. Generally, the individual stories get longer as you go through the sides. They start off as 1 or 2 pagers and they get up to about 9 or 10. The exception is the first one in side B, which is technically 36 pages, but that arc was published over 9 issues of Frigid Air, so it's in a bunch of really short chunks. Also, this cover, Indiana Jones is Back, is out of its section here on page 1, but I guess they wanted to start the book with this Warner Brothers parody vanity plate. Overall, I found Side A a slog. Side B was a little better. Side C and D, loved them. In fact, I could see myself skipping Side A completely when I read this again. It doesn't affect the story or anything. Going back to it here, these early comics really are kind of quaint, and you get to see Mattioli developing the comics feel and developing the characters and sort of figuring out what the comic was going to be. I like how almost every comic is called Joe Galaxy and the Wicked Lizards of Callisto 4, even though the Wicked Lizards don't really seem to appear in any of these episodes. And I appreciate how experimental it is with the layout. Like this one reads all the way around the center and the panels turn upside down, so you'd physically have to turn your magazine. Here's the exception to the Wicked Lizards rule. Dudes from the third galaxy. This alien shows up and he literally takes the color out of the comic, and then he hides in Joe's mind, and then these parallel universe cops show up, and they return the color, but they forget to return the lines at first. All the aliens in this book are great. Then we get back to the Wicked Lizards of Callisto 4, and I mean, look at these vibrating colors here. It's like something out of a psychedelic music poster. That's a bold choice for a comic. I mean, it's not a great choice, but it's bold. So we reach side B, and now Mattioli actually attempts an ongoing story of sorts. The Wicked Lizards finally come into play, but it's very experimental, and it hurts the readability, frankly. I can imagine if you were consuming Joe Galaxy 2 or 3 pages at a time in individual issues of Frigidaire, over 2 years, it wouldn't matter as much. But it's kind of jarring from page to page. The Joe Galaxy character is really established here. He's a hard-boiled, space PI, sort of a Sam Spade meets Flash Gordon. The color in this thing is wild. You've got collage elements. This is where the record theme comes into play. And there's lots of great cultural references. Mattioli obviously loves comics and film and music, and I'll do a supercut of some of my favorites at the end. This one with the purple panels looks like it was screen printed with blockout tape or something. The text on the second page is off register, and you actually can't read some of it. I imagine that's a fuck-up on Fantagraphics' end, but it didn't really hurt the read-through. Okay, so here's the famous Wicked Lizards of Callisto 4 that Mattioli had been teasing for 2 years at this point. And this last section of the story, it does start to come together, and it's got to be the most Mobius-inspired section of the book. And I'll just continue this sentence for a moment so I can splice in a slide of the aforementioned Mobius inspiration. And from here, I actually start to enjoy the book. It kind of felt like work before. There are 3 or 4 more punchy stories on this side, and Mattioli still plays with the art and color in a fun way, but it's more consistent in its scale and layout, and consequently more readable. You can see the retro space opera influence throughout the comic, but especially in the image of Joe Galaxy's rocket flying through space. I mentioned Flash Gordon, but it could come from any number of serials or TV shows or comics like Buck Rogers or just some random comic, maybe even some Italian comic I don't know about. But the image is kind of whittled down to its platonic form. This one-page vegan comic, vegans are a recurring alien race in Joe Galaxy, but they never seem to look the same or have the same physiology. It's kind of a running joke, like planets or anything really having a number after its name to sound more sci-fi. Invasion of the Flying Hamburgers. This one is interesting. Joe Galaxy really isn't in it much, except as a narrator, and he tells the story of how Earth was destroyed by a giant mutant hamburger, and the hero is this detective Toad. It's very America-centric, taking place in New York, and with all these fast food references. It's one of the best stories in the book, and it really makes me want to read some other Mattioli collections. I think he has a superhero parody comic, and he also did kid comics. I'd love to read those too. So, Side C. This section comprises the bulk of the book. It's even less experimental, but Mattioli has settled into what makes the comic great. Masterful use of color and texture. I mean, look at this outlined red shadow. And you've got this great interplay of line and flat color. You got rich blacks, but also yellow machine tones and more organic watercolors. It's such a delight. And the focus is on the wacky sci-fi concepts, the hard-boiled storytelling, the fun little chicken fat in the background, and of course all the wacky aliens technology and biomes. I love how the speech balloons come out of the gaping maw of this Xironid. He's got his cute little necktie. You gotta love these Lovecraftian aliens and, weird dinosaurs. And I especially love the strange, sexy aliens and all the action and sound effects and explosions. It's an orgy for your eyeballs. The title cards at the beginning of each story are great. The comic is totally weird and alien and otherworldly, but there are touches of familiarity. You've got some collage elements. And we'll skip ahead a bit here. Okay, so he can still break from the format, like the Joe Galaxy special show, where he's in a yellow void talking to the studio audience the whole time. And in fact, the comic is often presented as if it were a TV show. And, it would make a great TV show, actually. This one here, Do Canaries Dream of Electric Sheep? He tells the story of how canaries got to be so pathetic and why he despises them. And the whole time he's torturing these two birds, putting a blanket over their cage and taking it off, saying, "Wake up, shits, daytime. Betty bye, shits, nighttime." It's actually kind of cruel, but Joe Galaxy is a bird too, so I guess it's fine. This one, Oulé. This is mostly pantomime, and Joe Galaxy serves as a matador to this weird bull alien. It reminds me of Senor Droopy, which is a Tex Avery cartoon that I believe predated Bully for Bugs. Vamos. Now, this is one of my favorites because it really follows the hard-boiled detective format, and I'm a big fan of like the Raymond Chandler Marlowe books and stuff like that. And I also loved all the aliens, including the chick with 2 butt cracks. I guess I can't show that one on YouTube though, so check out the Patreon. Side D. So there isn't a huge shift in tone or anything in this section, and I guess the main reason for delineation is that you need an even number of sides for the record theme, and the comics in Side C were all done in a magazine called Comic Art from 1988 to early 1990, whereas these next 3 comics are from 2 years later in a magazine called Lupo Alberto. And they're also great. I especially like this one where he fights the Space Pope on planet Porn 69. This is some proper, goofy, sexy underground comics right here. Jurassic Planet is great too. You can tell Mattioli really loves drawing the dinosaurs because he uses their proper name, and the way they're depicted kind of reminds me of those campy, inaccurate rubber dinosaur toys or like retro stop-motion dinosaur and monster movies. It's also got these stupid alien commercials throughout, which break up the story in a fun way. This last one, Planet Doris, is a little disappointing. It's an unpublished comic from the year before Mattioli died. It's okay, but it's not a great send-off for Joe Galaxy. It would have been nice to get like a big drawing of a weird alien bar or a bordello or something like that, even if it was done by another artist, just as a palette cleanser. Which for our purposes can be a quick supercut of some of my favorite pop culture references from Joe Galaxy. Play the music. I'll start with the parody of the 20th Century Fox logo, which is also a Star Wars reference, because they put out Star Wars, a film that exists within the diegesis of the Joe Galaxy universe, even if these laser sword wielding cops have never heard of it. There's this taxi driver who is clearly just a medical droid, and he even has a pin that says the Empire Strikes Back fan club. That same comic has a couple of R2-D2 looking astromechs with Star Wars fan club pins. Also, Bingo here is like a synthesis of Han Solo and Chewbacca. And there are other sci-fi references like this Dalek from Doctor Who. But there's even more classic cartoon references, like Tom from Tom and Jerry, Mickey Mouse, this alien as shades of the elephants on parade scene from Dumbo. This UKP train is a bit like the Roadrunner, but it has the head of a Disney ostrich, with that little lump on top. The crow looks like the crow from Fox and Crow, a design that Crumb was also influenced by, so this could be influenced by proxy. And Johnny Pomerola is exactly the French rooster from Tex Avery's The Hick Chick. There's some horror imagery that reminds me of Italian horror films, like this poster for Disney's Buried Alive. Looks like the alternate poster for Fulci's zombie film. And speaking of posters, there's a Gremlins one on the wall of Steven Spielberg's office, a film he was executive producer for, and this poster for Squeak the Mouse Part 245. I guess only the first 3 made it to Earth. On Planet Porn 69, Joe teams up with a topless felinoid named after Sika, the Platinum Princess of Porn. And this taxi driver has a button that reads "I Heart Moana," referencing Moana Pozzi, or Moana Pazzi, the Italian crossover porn star who co-founded the radical Italian political party, the Love Party. And there are a ton of music references, but I think my favorite was the T-Rex singing a T-Rex song. Anyway, those are a few of my faves, but there are many more, and certainly some that went right over my head. Overall, this is a wonderful book. Beautiful psychedelic design. I mean, the colors on this thing. Wow. I suspect the book designers drew on earlier Italian collections, which maybe Mattioli was directly involved in. It's so much fun to read, at least after Part A. It's funny, it's sexy. If you love American underground comics, Crumb, Lynch, Spain, Shelton, you gotta have this book. If you love sci-fi fantasy, heavy metal, or Wit's End type stuff, and especially if you like sci-fi parody like Spaceballs, Rick and Morty, Futurama, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you're gonna love this book. And in fact, because the printing quality that Mattioli had access to during his career was obviously so much beyond what the rinky-dink underground publishers of the 70s and early 80s had access to, Joe Galaxy was free to take the medium places that just weren't possible in North American underground comics. And while it lacks the singular vision of Squeak the Mouse, it's still a great collection and definitely worth picking up. And you can pick it up right now from Fantagraphics. It just came out, so don't sleep on this one. It's absolutely worth the 35 quatlus, and I give it 4 out of 5 nostrils. I think there were a couple of things that could have been tweaked to bring it up to a 4.5 nostril book, but it's still very, very good. So there you have it, nostril heads. If you like this episode, hit like and subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. If you want to see this video uncensored, along with all of my other videos, including Canonically Crumb, you can buy those outright on my Patreon. No need to sign up for a monthly donation. Of course, if you do want to join, you can get them that way too, and as well you'll be thanked at the end of the show, which is now. And if you don't care about that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bin, darling, taking a rib.